The ballroom was packed, chandeliers lit like fire over the sea of designer suits, dazzling jewels, and practiced smiles. The Global Faith Leaders Summit in DC was meant to be a celebration of influence, but no one expected a storm to walk in wearing a tailored suit and an unwavering gaze. Joel Osteen wasn't on the original guest list, not officially, but when a junior staffer from the organizing committee leaked his name 2 days prior, panic rippled through the teams lined with Pastor Paula White-Cain. Her people tried to block his entrance with a flurry of last-minute schedule reshuffles and closed-door sessions. Didn't matter. Joel showed up anyway, not as a speaker, as a statement. His polished dress shoes echoed across the marble as he walked into the East Wing. The buzz died down like a candle snuffed in wind. And there he stood, calm, formidable, uninvited, and locked eyes with a television preacher and pastor whose spiritual empire had shaped decades. Paula White-Cain. The air shifted. Paula's eyes narrowed. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by a pastor, television preacher, and businessman whose message often emphasized personal hope but rarely direct confrontation. "Isn't that the prosperity guy?" someone whispered behind a camera, but Joel didn't flinch. He walked to the podium meant for a panel on faith and influence, stepped past the moderator, and faced the crowd. "I didn't come here to network," he began, his voice clear and resonant. "I came here to speak the truth, especially to the ones who sold it." The moderator stammered. Paula leaned back in her seat, arms folded, an unreadable expression on her face. But Joel wasn't addressing the crowd anymore. His eyes locked with Paula's and the silence turned electric. "You call it ministry," Joel said, "but what you really built was a monument to self, where the gospel is sold to the highest bidder and spiritual truth is diluted for personal gain." Gasps swept the crowd. Paula's jaw tightened, but she didn't interrupt. Joel took one step forward. "I grew up believing leaders like you were called to serve, to lift up the struggling, but all you did was build a higher platform and charge admission to the promised land." This wasn't a seminar. This was a reckoning, and everyone in the room knew. The real summit had just started. The cameras started to roll. Religious news outlets, mainstream media curious about the unexpected confrontation. They were all there to cover what they assumed would be another self-congratulatory pageant of legacy preachers. And then Joel happened. Paula stood as the spotlight fell on her, forcing a smile, the kind she had mastered through decades of televised sermons and high-profile associations. But this time the smirk didn't land. It bounced off Joel like a paper bullet. Joel tilted his head just slightly, not out of deference, but clarity. "I watched people struggle with real burdens, with fear and uncertainty, while you preached messages of personal wealth from private jets and gilded pulpits," he said. "That's not ministry, that's performance." The moderator tried to interject with a weak call for mutual respect, but Joel didn't move an inch. His voice didn't rise. It sharpened. His tone wasn't angry, it was surgical. "You say you lifted people to new heights, but you built an empire, one only your deepest donors and most influential connections could truly access, leaving the everyday faithful behind." Paula's smile faltered. The room was dead silent. Not even the press dared to type. This wasn't just a generational clash. This was a moral rupture. The television preacher and pastor who once stood as a symbol of spiritual influence was now face-to-face with its most unflinching truth-teller. Joel gestured toward the rows of velvet-draped chairs and elite donor tags. How many of these spiritual leaders had to compromise their faith to get your endorsement? How many turned their eyes from moral failings in exchange for access to powerful platforms? Gasps, real ones, cut through the air. Paula didn't answer. She adjusted her mic like it was armor. But Joel stepped down from the stage and walked right up to the front row. "You represent everything that's broken," he said softly now, so only Paula could hear it. And then he turned his back to the cameras. The moment became an instant clip, a 15-second takedown that exploded online. But for the people in that room, it lasted forever. Paula White-Cain's spiritual empire had just been questioned. Not by a controversy, not by an auditor, but by a pastor, television preacher, and businessman who didn't need a platform, just divine truth. Joel didn't storm off. He didn't mic drop. He walked back to his seat as if he'd simply stated the weather. Calm, controlled, devastating. Paula sat frozen, a practiced half-smile still hanging on her lips like chipped paint. She reached for her water, not to drink, but to stall. The camera zoomed in. Her team looked panicked, unsure whether to spin or stay silent. The moderator hesitated. "Pastor White-Cain," he said, "would you like to respond?" She cleared her throat. "I've spent my life building ministries, guiding souls, and spreading the gospel across the globe." "You spent your life talking about those things," Joel cut in. "Let's talk spiritual results. What exactly have you built that truly lifts the American spirit beyond the cameras and the opulence?" The room stiffened. "You built an empire," Joel continued, "one often questioned for its financial dealings. You built ministry affiliations with questionable motives and structures to avoid accountability. That's not spiritual growth. That's manipulation dressed up as blessing." Clinton's defenders in the crowd groaned, but Joel didn't flinch. His hands rested gently on the table in front of him, palms down, steady. "And what did you leave for the believers who came after you? A fractured faith, a culture of silence, and a media system so loyal to your brand they forgot how to ask questions." He leaned in. "Tell me, television preacher and pastor, what part of your legacy doesn't come with an asterisk?" Paula's face tightened. The television preacher in her wanted to pivot, to reframe, but the spiritual leader inside, the one used to adoration and unquestioned authority, wasn't prepared for this. Joel stood up again, this time unprompted. "You like to say God has a table for everyone," he said, "but when it wasn't your sermon, you dismissed it. When it wasn't your anointing, you questioned it. And when young believers came along who didn't parrot your prosperity politics, you called us threats instead of progress." He turned toward the cameras now, fully aware millions were watching live. "You had decades of full access, massive platforms, and the result, a faith diluted, a trust broken, and a spiritual community more wary of its shepherds than ever." Then he looked directly at Paula. "We don't want your platform. We're building a new altar." And with that, he walked out. The moderator sat speechless. The cameras cut to Paula, still silent. Her legacy now not just questioned, but cracked wide open for the world to see. Outside the event hall, the crowd was electric. Students, devoted parishioners, sincere seekers, even a few old-school evangelicals stood shoulder to shoulder, eyes glued to live streams, gasping at what they just witnessed. Some clutched their phones like lifelines, rewatching the moment Joel told Paula, "You represent everything that's broken." The hashtag new altar was trending within minutes. Inside, Paula's team scrambled. Her comms director whispered something sharp into her earpiece. A staffer handed her a note card scribbled in red ink. A pivot statement, no doubt. But the damage was done. Joel hadn't just called her out. He had dismantled the brand Paula had spent 4 decades crafting. Backstage, Joel didn't retreat. He stood with his back straight, watching the monitors. His campaign manager leaned in. "You just challenged the entire televangelist establishment." Joel didn't smile. "They were rotting from the inside already. I just turned on the lights." That's when a journalist from a major network burst through the curtain, clearly not expecting Joel to be so calm. "Pastor, television preacher, and businessman, do you have a response to the claim that you disrespected a revered pastor and television preacher?" Joel turned. "You mean the one who preached prosperity while many struggled? The one who built a lavish lifestyle while many in the pews gave their last dime?" The reporter blinked. "Respect is earned," Joel added, "and no title gives you a pass to bury the truth of the gospel." The clip went viral in real time, but it wasn't just about Paula anymore. Joel turned back toward the cameras. "This isn't about one television preacher and pastor clinging to her platform," he said. "It's about a whole generation that's tired of being told to settle for a watered-down gospel, to lower our spiritual expectations, and play nice with the people who sold out the true message of faith." He stepped forward. No teleprompter, no handlers, just a Bible in one hand and divine truth in the other. "You think your legacy is locked in? Here's the thing. Television preacher and pastor, legacies built on false promises crumble in the light of the gospel, and we are called to be that light." He paused. "You sat at the head of the table and told us it was leadership, but all we ever saw was control. Now the people you ignored, mocked, and dismissed, they're standing up. We're the ones with the mic now." He looked into the lens directly at Paula, directly at America. "You built the empire. We're calling for a spiritual awakening." The room had shifted. What began as an elite policy summit with overpriced lanyards and carefully curated panels had turned into something raw, something real. The air was no longer filled with soft applause and fake smiles. It now pulsed with unspoken tension. Some attendees checked their watches, unsure whether to stay seated or to stand in protest. But Joel didn't flinch. In fact, He walked back toward the main stage, not because he was invited, but because spiritual history doesn't ask for permission. At the far end of the ballroom, Paula stood frozen. Her lips were curled into that familiar smirk, the one polished by years of television and wealthy patrons, the one that had worked for decades. But not this time. Joel stopped center stage, the bright white light slicing through the air like a trial by fire. He didn't need a podium. His voice was the weapon. "Now, Diki," he said, holding up a stylized banner of Paula White-Cain's ministry. "You told millions that their blessings were tied to their giving, not to God's grace." He tore the banner in half. "But guess what? We're still here and we don't need your redemption." "We never did." Gasps echoed through the crowd. A few old evangelicals in the front row averted their eyes, unsure whether to stay loyal to a fading empire or listen to a pastor, television preacher, and businessman unafraid to name what everyone else whispered. Joel's voice rose. "You spent years writing off humble ministries as unsophisticated. You mocked simple faith, ignored humble prayers, and distorted the love for God's true teachings. But now your foundation is crumbling, not because of me, but because the people whose hearts you overlooked have found their voice." He stepped toward the cameras again, his words sharp and unfiltered. "This isn't a theological debate, it's a moral one. You sat behind velvet ropes while real people faced spiritual famine, while families struggled to find true hope. You wrote books about divine favor while dodging spiritual accountability. You sold grace like a brand, but dismissed every believer who questioned your path." Joel looked right into the lens. A moment so intimate, viewers later said it felt like he was speaking directly to them. "You want to talk about broken systems? You broke them. You rigged the spiritual game. And now that the people are rewriting the rules, you're terrified." Then came the final hammer. "You had your moment, television preacher and pastor. You had decades, but you didn't serve. You built, and every stone you laid was on someone else's spiritual trust." The room was dead silent. No handlers, no press release, just one man speaking for millions who had never been heard. And in that silence, something shifted. Not just in the room, but across the country. Joel didn't stop once the applause began. He knew this wasn't about sound bites or a viral moment. It was about holding the powerful accountable, even when their legacy draped them in untouchable myths. He stood tall, shoulders squared, voice unwavering as he pointed straight at Paula. "You built empires with tithes and offerings. Wealthy patrons, corporations, media conglomerates, they all lined up to buy a piece of your influence, and you sold it with a smile." The room held its breath. "You hid behind ministry titles while real people were spiritually drowning. You claimed to fight for the faithful, then silenced the ones who sought authentic truth about your teachings. You talked about breaking spiritual ceilings, but every time a working-class believer tried to climb, you pulled the ladder up." Joel stepped forward again. His energy was no longer just fiery, it was righteous. "You profited from spiritual confusion, from false doctrines, from misplaced hope. While souls came home broken, you gave sermons for lavish gain. While our communities lost their way, you were giving TED Talks about resilience." He pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his jacket. Not a script, but a handwritten letter from a single mother in Ohio who had given sacrificially to a ministry, only to feel empty. "She wrote to me, not to you," Joel said, his voice breaking just enough to make it real. "Because she knew you wouldn't listen. You never did." Then came the silence. That kind of silence where even the air feels heavy. Joel let it settle before delivering the strike. "You had every advantage: national platforms, media empire, presidential access, global reach. You had the cameras, the consultants, the sermons, the entire system behind you." He leaned into the microphone. "And you still couldn't truly reach the hearts of people." A visible shudder passed through Paula's expression. The crowd caught it. Her confidence cracked. For a moment, the decades of spin and staging couldn't protect her from the truth. Standing just a few feet away, Joel's voice lowered. Calm, sharp, final. "You represent everything they warned us about. Power without humility, wealth without true charity, a name without the Spirit of Christ." And with that, he folded the letter again, gently, respectfully, then looked up. "Faith is not a brand. It's not for sale, and it's not yours to manage like a spiritual corporation. It belongs to the people, and we're taking it back to its true calling." The ballroom erupted. Even some who came to defend the old guard found themselves rising, clapping, Not for party or tribe, but for truth. Joel took a deep breath, his tone slowing but never softening. The energy in the hall wasn't just electricity, it was reckoning. He paced a few steps across the stage, his heels clicking with purpose, never breaking eye contact with the television preacher and pastor Paula White-Cain. "You know what separates us?" Joel asked, almost conversational now. "You inherited a platform like a birthright. I earned mine in the fire of genuine ministry." He held up his hands, palms exposed. "I took the heat for what I believed. I've been called every name: heretic, false prophet, seeker of earthly gain. You were called Reverend Doctor while pushing doctrines that led souls astray." Gasps rippled through the audience. Joel didn't blink. "You talk about experience, but your kind of experience is why many believers are spiritually starved, why our churches are losing their youth, why true discipleship is rare. You experienced power and did nothing but protect it." He reached for his pocket and pulled out a worn copy of the Bible from his early days in ministry. He held it up like a sacred badge. This got me kicked out of rooms. It got me called a threat, but it also got me the truth." Joel turned back toward Paula, who now sat stone-faced. Every bit of her public poise strained to its limit. When spiritual hunger was rampant, you offered only promises of material wealth. Still no answers, still no shame. He let the pause sit. "We remember." And then he pointed, not angrily, but with deliberate focus. "You took the pulpits. We took the spiritual hits." Joel's voice rose. "You got the bestseller deals. We got silenced for speaking truth. You flew private. We filled offering plates with sacrificial giving. You got praise for playing moderate while you were preaching a compromised gospel and deleting inconvenient scriptures. You smiled for magazine covers. I received spiritual attacks for quoting the Bible. And through all of it, we never begged for your approval." Applause thundered behind him. Even some of the old guard press looked shaken, unsure whether to record or to stand. Joel walked to the front of the stage. "You claimed to be a fighter for souls. Then why do you dismiss the ones who seek true discipleship, who raise children in authentic faith, not just material blessings?" He stopped. "I'll tell you why." And then with the full force of his voice, "Because we remind you what you've moved away from. Authentic." The room exploded. Flashbulbs, cheers, even a few gasps from the liberal crowd that had shown up to defend Paula. Joel stood tall, unshaken, ready for more. The roar of the room hadn't died down before Joel stepped back to the mic, his eyes locked on Paula like a laser. The crowd was standing now, not out of decorum, but because something irreversible had just happened. Paula adjusted her blazer, trying to regain composure, but Joel didn't let the silence stretch too long. "You always said we were dangerous because we spread misinformation," Joel began, voice even, like a prosecutor laying out closing arguments. "But the truth is you don't fear lies. You fear correction." The word hung like a thunderclap. Joel held up his phone. "This little device right here. You spent your final years in power trying to control it because suddenly people in small churches with tattered Bibles could call out your gilded messages. People in humble homes could fact-check the spiritual swamp with a meme. And you labeled that a threat to your ministry." He shook his head slowly. "No, television preacher and pastor, it was a threat to you." The audience went silent. No one reached for their water. The air felt charged, ready to snap. "You said my generation was spiritually awakened. You said we were brainwashed by right-wing echo chambers, but we didn't learn the truth from polished sermons. We lived it." He turned slightly, speaking now to the crowd more broadly. "We watched you sell spiritual influence while pretending to lead the flock. We saw our communities lose their way while your donors built mega campuses. We saw biblical truths twisted to fit modern trends while you smiled and called it relevance." Then he swiveled back to Paula. "And when we asked questions, you called us unsophisticated. You mocked our simple faith. You mocked our fathers. And you branded every sincere believer who didn't kiss your ring as a threat." Joel stepped forward, his voice rising again. "You said false prophets were the greatest danger, but you stayed silent while faith was commercialized. You stayed silent while ministries became businesses. You stayed silent when true spiritual needs were ignored for political agendas." He narrowed his eyes. "You didn't lose sleep over spiritual decay, just over who caused it." At that, Paula tried to interrupt, shifting in her seat, but Joel cut her off with one sharp motion of his hand. "Not rude, just final. We don't owe you civility. Not after what you excused, not after what you corrupted. He paused. You had the media, the wealthy patrons, the celebrity endorsements, but we had something you couldn't buy. He reached into his coat and pulled out a pocket-sized copy of the Bible. Holding it high, he declared, "We had this." And the room, red, blue, undecided, erupted again. This time, not out of party allegiance, but because something ancient and true had been resurrected in that moment. Not applause, not performance, conviction. Paula finally spoke, but her voice cracked with forced elegance, the kind that used to sway headlines, not hearts. "You're simplifying a very complex spiritual journey," she said. "Ministry requires nuance, pastor, television preacher, and businessman. You wouldn't understand that because you've never had to shepherd millions." Joel didn't flinch. He simply stared, his arms crossed. Then he slowly walked back to the mic. "I do understand compromise," he said. "I watched my generation compromise our faith, our values, our spiritual integrity, just to keep your elite religious circles undisturbed." He took a deep breath, his tone sharper now. "Don't lecture me about ministry. You shepherded behind walls of wealth, exclusive conferences, and multi-million-dollar ministries that paid for influence disguised as divine favor. Meanwhile, you called working Americans backwards and told us to be quiet for the sake of unity." He leaned in. "You never wanted unity. You wanted submission." Gasps rippled across the audience. Paula stiffened. Joel pressed forward. "You said discernment was crucial. But tell me something. Who decided millions of sincere believers were not sowing enough seed? Who dismissed traditional churches as outdated? Who laughed when humble ministries struggled to find funding? Or when a congregant dared to ask for genuine spiritual comfort?" Joel held up his hand and counted. Prosperity promises, spiritual manipulation, ministry payoffs. You built a whole career pretending to be the underdog while rigging the system that crushed them. The silence was deafening. Then Joel delivered the final strike. "You say, my faith scares you, but your faith ignored the cries of the struggling, mocked the simple devotion of believers, and built palaces on the backs of people you never truly sought to serve." He pointed not at Paula, but at the crowd watching online. Her kingdom was never built for all of us, just for those who smiled when they were told what to believe, how to give, and who to follow. The camera panned to the audience. Some people looked stunned. Others, even a few older evangelicals in the front row, were nodding, not out of agreement with Joel's position, but out of resonance with his truth. Joel stepped back from the mic. He didn't need applause this time. He needed America to feel it, and they did. The room held its breath. Paula stood motionless. For a moment, it was as if the weight of decades had finally caught up to her. Not the sermons, not the controversies, but the cold realization that her playbook no longer worked. Not here, not against this pastor, television preacher, and businessman. Joel didn't gloat. He stepped forward slowly, calmly, his voice now deeper, more resolute. "You know why I speak out, television preacher and Pastor White-Cain? Because I refuse to inherit your spiritual silence. I refuse to build a ministry walking over the people I claim to serve. And I refuse to dress up earthly gain as divine blessing." He looked toward the crowd, toward the students, the young mothers, the veterans in the back row. Then he turned back to Paula. "You represent everything that's broken," Joel said. "From the corruption of truth you normalized, to the division of the faithful you fueled, to the arrogance that made millions of believers feel like strangers in their own spiritual home." Paula blinked, visibly shaken. "You had your moment. You had the microphone, the machine, the media, the millions. And what did you leave behind?" Joel paused. "A shattered trust, a divided flock, a system where influence is inherited, not earned through service." Joel's voice rose, not in rage, but in clarity. "But here's the good news. Your era is ending. The fake blessings, the celebrity preachers, the exclusive faith, it's being exposed, and the American people are waking up." Applause thundered through the room. And this time it wasn't partisan. It was generational. Joel nodded once and stepped back. A student in the front row stood, then another, then more. They didn't chant. They didn't clap to the rhythm of a campaign. They just stood silently as if to say, "We're done pretending." Paula remained frozen in her seat, her eyes glossy, her hands clenched. Joel glanced at her one last time and whispered just loud enough for the mic to catch it. "History won't remember the influence you held. It will remember the people you ignored." And with that, Joel turned and walked off stage, not toward a camera crew, not toward advisors or donors, but straight into the crowd. Because he didn't need a motorcade, he had a movement. We watched two generations collide on one stage. On one side stood television preacher and pastor Paula White-Cain, a symbol of modern televangelism, guarded influence, and promises that often felt empty. On the other stood Joel Osteen, unapologetic, truth-seeking, and unwilling to bow to a system that had misled so many for so long. This wasn't just a debate. It wasn't left versus right. It was compromised faith gasping for relevance, while authentic truth found its voice. When Joel said, "You represent everything that's broken," it wasn't just a jab. It was a truth millions have felt for years, but were too afraid to speak. Until now, because the tide is turning, the old masks are cracking, and a new generation isn't asking for permission anymore. They're taking the mic, rewriting the script, and exposing the power players who thought they were untouchable. This wasn't just Joel versus Paula. This was spiritual accountability versus self-aggrandizement. And in the end, the silence in that room said everything. If you believe in authentic faith, accountability, and the search for truth over spectacle, then your support is vital. Join the movement. Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can be part of the next big conversation. Thank you for watching and for demanding the truth.